Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast, a 3-time award-winning show that aims to motivate and inspire you while increasing the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. If you're passionate about adventure, challenge and learning from women who have overcome obstacles and achieved remarkable things, then this is the podcast for you. Every Tuesday at 7 a.m, new episodes go live featuring incredible women who share their stories, insights and tips to help you achieve your dreams and goals. You can support the Tough Girl mission by signing up as a patron. Visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Keep listening until the very end as I share more information about what's going on with me with Tough Girl Challenges, give shout outs and recommend other Tough Girl Podcast episodes. More information can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com.
I'm Ali Mahoney, also known as Ali Mahoney Johnson, which is my unofficial married name. I'm 50 years old and I live in South Wales with my wife Amy and our son Ollie, who's 4 years old now. And we live on a farm, which is Amy's mother's farm. So we're really busy here with a flock of black Welsh mountain sheep. Always lots to do, always getting our hands dirty. And that isn't even our main job. So I work in the civil service now. I've been working there since 2018. And I was working as a sports psychology practitioner from that date as well. But I've kind of parked that now because we've got other things going on here at the farm, plans to diversify and open a glamping business. And I work part-time in the civil service. So since having my son, life has changed a lot. Life has really changed a lot since I spoke to you back in 2016. And I think since I first met you in 2015 at the Women's Adventure Expo. So life is busy. I think, the podcast I did in 2016 was about that epic bike ride from South Wales to Chamonix, which was the biggest and baddest adventure I think I've ever done in my life. I feel like I'm still recovering from it in some ways, actually. That was quite life-changing in some ways in terms of what I felt that I was capable of as both a woman and as both physically and mentally. And since then, I guess over the years, life has changed quite dramatically and I've done lots of other different, more mini adventures. And obviously now trying to fit that around life with a son and being on a farm is challenging at times, but it is also fun as well.
Thank you for resetting the scene because, I'd almost forgot that we met in 2015, at the Women's Adventure Expo. So actually, the next year we will have known each other for 10 years because I think it's weird, even though we haven't spoken on the podcast, we've seen each other quite a bit, haven't we? Because you came and joined me for the Wales Coast Path.
That's right.
Yeah, you and Amy and Ollie. Ollie must have only been, Amy was carrying him in, what do you call it? The backpack. So
he was in the baby backpack at the time. Yeah.
He was Diddy. And then National Outdoor Expo, we've definitely caught up at the Outdoor Expo as well. Again, he was Diddy.
I saw you at the end of the Wales Coast Path. I think Ollie was a bit bigger then.
That was so lovely. Yes, because I've got photos and little bits of video of fist pumping and high-fiving Ollie and stuff, and you as well. But life has really changed because if we think back, you were 41 when you started with the, with the bike ride from South Wales to Chamonix. And then what age did you get married and what age did you have Ollie?
Ollie is 4 now. So I would have been 46. So, Amy is 40 something. So we're older mums, we're doing motherhood a bit later in life. And Amy and I got married in 20, oh my goodness, if I get this
come on, you got to get this right.
2013, February 2013. And back then it was an unofficial, it was a civil ceremony because it wasn't legal then to get married, funnily enough. And I think it was the year later the government brought in that you could officially marry your partner. So then we did it sounds really weird, but a conversion. I think we paid £4 at the local registry office. And then lo and behold, we were officially married. So yeah, that's a long time ago now. We had our 10-year anniversary in February. Oh my goodness, last year. Yeah. So yeah, time has really flown. And obviously with having Ollie in our lives now, things are extremely different, but it's different in a good way for sure.
How much did you discuss? Because, like adventuring and sport has been a lot of what you've done with the different types of challenges, whether it's like coast to coast or total wipeout in Argentina or, all these sort of crazy adventures. Thinking back to deciding when you and Amy were going to have a baby and, to be older mums as well, how much did you discuss in terms of how are we going to fit adventure and challenge into our life whilst having a baby? Or was that not necessarily a concern? Had you sort of like moved forward, but not necessarily moved on, but it was almost like maybe that's like less of a priority, or is it still sort of quite a priority?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really a conversation that we had. I think the pair of us both thought that we could kind of still fit that into our everyday lives. With him, it would just be different. So before we had him, we had a camper van. We've still got the same camper van. So I think in my mind, rightly or wrongly, I thought things wouldn't change that much and we'd all be able to pile in the camper van, put him in a backpack, walk up a mountain or chuck him on a bike and off we go. It has been different. It has been a bit more challenging than I think I thought it would be. But also, I haven't really been put off by the challenges because in the media now, and especially on your podcast and just on social media, there are so many badass mums with their kids doing amazing things. Both locally in my community and further afield. That I think it is a process for me. I'll speak just myself, but a process of adaptation. You've got this tiny person with you now who can't cycle the 50 miles that you might want to do, or can't walk miles up a mountain without asking for snacks or saying they're bored or wanting to go home. So it is really different. I mean, when he was younger, when he was a baby, I found it a bit easier because we could just pop him in the backpack or stick him in the bike carrier and pedal him around. But now he's a lot more active. So, of course, we want him to be a part of our active lives. And we're finding different ways to adapt to that. So he no longer, for example, he no longer wants to sit in the back on a bike carrier, like a bike trailer. He wants to be on his own bicycle. So Amy recently found a tow bar for sale, which I didn't even know was a thing for kids. So her tow bar attached to her bike and his bike that has stabilizers on because he's just gone up from a balance bike. And we had this most amazing bike ride down the Brecon Canal towpath. And it was such a good feeling for him to be pedaling away, pushing his mammy on for a bit as well. And that was the best experience. I was like, this is what it's about. It's about adapting and finding ways for him to become involved in what we're doing, but also for us to get something out of it as well and finding that balance. So yeah, that can be tricky, but it is quite interesting to find different ways to get him involved now. And I guess that will change as well as the years go on, as his interests change and as he gets taller and stronger and, maybe he doesn't want to come up a mountain. Maybe he wants to do something else. Maybe he wants to do swimming. But, we'd love for him to be active in whatever he wants to do and we'll fit around that.
You're 50 years young now, which is brilliant. But I'd love to talk about sort of the last decade with regards to, I suppose, perimenopause, menopause. Like, how has that journey been for you?
It's been quite an interesting journey. So obviously going back to my 40s, that's when I did that bike ride to Chamonix. And I think at that time I was going through a transition in terms of age. What did being in my 40s mean? What did it mean in terms of what I could do physically? Because at the time, well, earlier in my life, I've had all these different knee injuries and I was struggling to leave competitive sport behind. And so the Chamonix bike ride was a bit of a challenge to see how far I could stretch myself. Was there kind of life outside of sport and could I do some more adventurous things on the bike or the trails or whatever? And then since then, the injuries have kind of been recurring. I've been trying to balance what in my mind I'd really like to do versus what physically I can practically do. That's kind of carried on throughout the last decade in terms of trying not to push things too hard, but also wanting excitement and different experiences in my life, but knowing that, that right knee might not let you do those crazy things. So it has been a balance. And, especially even now today, we've just been moving hay around the farm and I got a tweak in my knee and I'm like, oh God, it's like a little reminder that things are not 100% and they might not ever be. I just need to find ways around it. And, getting on the bike isn't an issue, or walking on the flat isn't an issue. But yeah, I am getting older and there's a frustration tied to that in terms of I want to almost be that person that I was in my 30s. I think that's the decade I look back on most fondly in terms of what I was doing from a kind of sport and exercise and adventure point of view, but then also getting into that period of acceptance that, life is changing now. My body is changing. Mentally, I feel super strong, but physically, I'm still trying to navigate the challenges with the joints and the muscles and the fitness. And in terms of menopause/perimenopause, I'm going to touch wood because I don't feel like I've entered into that phase of my life yet, unless I'm missing something. And maybe I'm just being really naive, but I know some of my colleagues at work talk about their struggles on a regular basis. But I don't feel that I'm experiencing any of the symptoms that they're talking about. And I know it's coming. And that feels a bit rubbish. I feel like as women, we've got a bit of a rough deal in that sense. But I think, part of me in the back of my mind is thinking, well, let's just enjoy life to the fullest while I can, because there are going to be other challenges around the corner as my body transitions in whatever way that might be.
But you're also like not alone with that, because from obviously not an expert, but from the people that I've spoken to and from friends who are going through perimenopause or menopause, I've also got other friends who are in their 50s, early 50s, and were literally just like didn't really notice it. It just suddenly sort of happened, and it was just like, okay, well that's done with. Right, what's next? And then I know for other people, it's like not the world is ending, but like it's just like everything that could possibly go has gone, and it's just been a horrendous number of years. So I think there is just like a massive spectrum. So, but I think it's also good to share that as well, just so it's almost like to take it like it's, but you know what I mean. Not so it's not complete like fear, but actually it can be. Maybe it's just if you're on the other end of the spectrum, it's like, oh, okay, like this is actually. This is okay.
Yeah, and I think what I love in terms of nowadays, the fact that we're actually having a conversation about it, because I don't ever remember my mother talking about it, when she was going through it. But obviously now there is so much more talk about it, which I think is fantastic, because it is such a good support network now for people out there. Things that are on the internet, things that are on social media, support groups, both online and in person, and different activities that you can join in your local community. It is brilliant. And whether I'll experience, something in the next months, years, or whatever, I guess I don't feel worried about it happening. I feel like it's inevitable, but I know then that there are resources out there that will be able to help. And especially in terms of health and fitness, I don't feel like it's the end of something. I feel like it could be a new chapter to try and do new things, perhaps with a new set of people.
Yeah. You have recently celebrated I was going to say, does that sound rude if I'm like a mega birthday? But turning 50, congratulations. How was the experience for you? Was in the lead up to turning 50, was it dread? Was it excitement? How were you feeling?
Yeah, well, halfway to 100, it feels like a significant age, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it feels different to turning 40. Turning 40 didn't bother me at all. And I wouldn't say that turning 50 bothered me in a negative sense, but I think if it did bother me, it was like, okay, I feel a little bit like I'm running out of time now. I think mortality kind of became more to the forefront of my mind, and I think a decade ago, turning 50 seemed old to me, if that makes sense. Not old as in old lady, but just, oh my goodness, 50. That's an age, And I think in the lead up to it, I wanted to celebrate it. I felt like in some ways it was a little I don't know, in some ways more significant than turning 40, but I can't put my finger on why. So I wanted to do something with my family to celebrate, and we ended up going to Porto in Portugal for a few days to celebrate and had a fantastic long weekend out there in the sun and with Ollie and extended family, and that was brilliant, really, really good. But I also felt that I wanted to do something to celebrate turning 50 as well. So I've been racking my brains and kind of asking, I think on the tribe, I asked, for some ideas about what potentially I could do as a challenge to celebrate. And I flipped around with a few ideas. And at one point, I almost talked myself out of doing anything at all. So I was like, well, why do I feel the need to actually do something? Why not just celebrate as people traditionally do? But so yeah, I did. Yeah, I ended up settling, I guess, on a hike across Malta. But before that, I'd flipped around with some ideas about, well, could I go and cycle 50 miles somewhere? Could I walk 50 miles somewhere? But I felt like it needed to be a bit more meaningful and a bit more significant. So not necessarily about the distance, but to try and find some meaning in the adventure. If Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know what you said, like it's really weird, like because I know people like you who are in like your in your 50s, and I know other women who are approaching that age, but they're still doing adventures and challenges and running. And I think and I've spoken to so many women like in their 60s, in their 70s, who are just living their best life and just doing the adventures and challenges and getting on their bike and doing what they can. And so, and obviously as I'm getting older as well, and I still, even though like I'm in my early 40s, I still feel really young, and I don't even think of 50 as like that old, if you know what I mean. And I don't know if it's just because like there's just so many women that I'm speaking to who are like, actually, yeah, I want to continue doing adventures and challenges. And but actually I do understand like having making it meaningful for you and creating like a memory. But why Malta? Was there a connection with Malta? Why did you end up settling on Malta?
Yeah, there's a long connection there. So my grandmother was Maltese. So even as really young kids, my mum and dad took us to the island almost every summer, and we'd meet extended family and, cousins and great aunts and great uncles and, a huge network of family there. And it was the place where I took my first steps as a baby. So my mum and dad often talk about that. And I know they're really proud of that because it happened in my great aunt and uncle's house in a town called Floriana, just outside the capital city of Valletta. So when we'd been there before as children, they'd walk us to this house, this 3-story, I think it's limestone on the island, limestone building. And they're like, oh, up there on the roof is where you took your first steps. And Uncle Leslie and Auntie Carmen were crying. And it was a marvelous moment. And obviously that stuck with me, over the years. And when Ollie took his first steps, it was actually in Chamonix in the French Alps. And I know for me and Amy, that was like an amazing moment in our lives. It was like, oh my God, he just walked. And then he didn't properly walk for another month or so, but it was like proper footsteps. So I guess in that moment, I realized how significant it was for my parents to see me walk for the first time. So when I was considering options for celebrating my 50th, and I kept being drawn back to the island of Malta and thinking about whether we could, myself, Amy, and Ollie could go over there as a family, and maybe we could go for the week, and I could either cycle or walk or do something. And but then that idea was quickly put to one side because the cost of doing that. I mean, now that we're stuck with going away in school holidays, the cost of vacations abroad in those school holidays are absolutely ridiculous. So I thought about going over there just for a few days to do a walk. So I got on Google Maps. I had a look at the circumference of the island. I had a look at walking across the island. And that's where the plan formed then. I figured I could walk east to west. Is that right? Let me do the compass quickly in my mind. Yeah, east to west across the island. And if I had time, that I could also walk across Gozo and the other islands of Camino, which are Malta's little sister islands. So that was the plan. And then it was about the logistics. Could I fit it in? Could I fit it around work? Could I fit it around Ollie and his childcare? If I did it in a holiday, would Amy have time off? Would I be able to get the flights from our local airport? There was so much to try and factor in. And in addition to that, I'd applied for a grant from a website called The Next Challenge, which is run by an adventurer called Tim Moss. And Tim had given me some advice years ago now, before I set off for my bike ride to Chamonix. And I'd seen this grant process. Like every year, people were applying for grants to do these amazing challenges, adventures. So I'd almost convinced myself that my little trek across the island wasn't going to be worthy enough of applying for this grant. But I thought, you know what, do it anyway. And I think I did it because I had always heard messages, especially through your podcast, like, just do it, just have a go. You never know, and no adventure is too small, and those kind of messages. And I heard in March that I'd been successful, and he was granting me £150 toward the cost of the challenge. So I was like, brilliant, it's on. But at that point, I hadn't told Amy, so that was an interesting conversation.
Oh, so first of all, well done for applying, because actually you've got to be in it to win it, like 100%. And I love what Tim is doing. I'll share his link to the nextchallenge.org website where the grant comes out. So I know you're good at like logistics and planning, and I think you're very sort of thoughtful about the challenge and recognizing, if you've got a few little niggles in your knee and stuff, you've got an additional, 150 quid, which can go, a long way for it. But conversation with Amy, like I can see her being totally supportive. Like,
yeah, and this is history repeating itself, isn't it? Because it was a similar thing with the Chamonix bike ride. I think I'd spent all the time planning the logistics and the routes, and I guess, and that was part of my building confidence in terms of, is it possible? Is it practically possible? So it's the same with the Malta trek. It's like, right, okay, there's these flights leaving on these days at these times and this cost. And it ended up being a trip in August. So I was like, right, Amy's off on these days. Ollie's not in school. If I go Monday to Thursday, then, we've got kind of child cover. I'm not away for too long, and all those things were factored in. So, yeah, I mean, she thinks I'm crazy, but she was absolutely supportive. And I wish that we could have made it as a family holiday, but the cost of going over there for a week, I think it was about £2,000 for, a 7-night stay for the 2 adults and 1 4-year-old, which was just an insane amount of money. So yeah, I ended up flying out there on my own to do this hike solo, which was good. It was a good experience.
Because I know, because like previously, like you've done a lot of cycling and stuff, but hiking, how is it going to work? Were you going to be sort of wild camping? Were you going to be sort of staying at like hostels along the way? Were you going to be having to carry much stuff? And had you trained with a pack before you went out?
Yeah, so in terms of training, I'd been doing a little bit of walking. So to put this in perspective, I'm at the moment, and during this walk, I'm probably in the worst shape of my life at the moment in terms of aerobic fitness. I've been trying to get on the exercise bike a few times a week, smash out 10 miles, do a few weights on the little weights bench that I've got, and just try and be as active as possible around that. So, and I was definitely not in the fittest place, in terms of being prepared for this. But then also, it wasn't the longest walk in the world either. So I felt confident that it was physically possible, and it wasn't going to challenge me too much in terms of, the day to day. And then in terms of a pack, the flights that I took meant that I just had the pack that was on my back. So I flew out on the Monday morning and flew back on the Thursday. So it was only the Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, 3 nights. So I packed as little as possible. I packed a hydration pack so I could drink water along the way, and, bare pants, a couple of pairs of shorts, a couple of t-shirts, and very little else really. So I obviously packed light on purpose because I was having to carry that pack each of those days. So I hadn't left any kit anywhere. I'd literally got off the plane, got an Uber to my starting point and started walking. And then in terms of accommodation, I hadn't booked any accommodation, which it felt a little bit unnerving because, like you said, I'm normally a planner and I like to know what I'm doing. But being an island and it, being heavy for tourism and it being in August, I felt like I should be okay. So I booked a couple of guest houses along the way, which were just easy to find. I just jumped on Google towards the end of the day or booking.com, had a look at what was affordable, booked it there and then. About 2 hours later, I'm checking into the hotel. So that's kind of how the logistics worked and in terms of where I was physically. So yeah, that's kind of how it started.
In my head, when you said in a couple of pairs of t-shirts, a couple of pairs of shorts, I was like, oh my God, you're overpacking. You do not need extra clothing. I'm like, literally just the clothes you walk in, you sleep in them, a warm jacket, and waterproof. Although I'm saying waterproof, but this is Malta in August. Now, I love this. I can picture the sunshine, the 30 plus, maybe 40-degree heat. And I'm just like, oh my God, get me there right now. Just that glorious sun. I can feel it warming into my bones and my skin. Oh wow, oh yeah, I'm getting happy thinking about it. But let's talk about Malta in August with the heat. Like, are you good in the heat? Are you I, I don't I was gonna say I don't know. Like
So the heat was ridiculous. I've got to say, right, this was as soon as not as soon as I stepped off the plane, because so I'll go back a step. So the flight was Monday morning at 6 a.m. from Bristol. And I'd driven my camper van the night before to a campsite nearby. And the guy that ran the campsite was like, hey, sure, you can leave your van here for a few days, pick it up when you get back. Well, that was brilliant. So I was up at like 3:30 Monday morning to get my 6 a.m. flight, 9:09. I'm trying to think of the timings now. But I remember getting off the plane and thinking, oh, this is lovely. It was like 30 odd degrees. There was a nice breeze. And I was like, oh, this is brilliant. And one of my Maltese friends had messaged me and about this trip, and she was like, you're crazy. Do you remember the heat? You're a crazy woman. And I'd looked on the weather and it was early 30s. So it was like anything between 30 to 34 over the Monday to Thursday. So I was like, that's doable. I'm going to be sensible. I should be fine. So by the time I got off the plane, got through security, which took forever, got out the front, ordered myself a taxi. When I was waiting for a taxi, oh my God, outside, I was like, this is brutal because the heat was just coming up from the pavement outside the airport. And of course, it's been like this all summer, and it's a small island in the middle of the Mediterranean. And so it's this hot rock, basically. And plus, I'd forgotten all about the humidity. So in a dry heat, it's different, isn't it? Because, you can have a little fan and cool down. But when it's humid and hot, I feel personally like my body doesn't respond very well to that. I find it really, really hard to cool down. Um, I feel like my body doesn't respond very well or be able to cool itself down. So I think that was the moment when I thought, oh my God, what have I done? So when I got in my taxi, my air conditioned taxi, and he kicked me out at my starting point, and I started to film my little blog. I was like, Jesus, it's probably midday by then. Who walks in the midday heat in August in Malta? Literally no one. It's ridiculous. So at that point, that was alarm bells, and I had to kind of gather myself.
when that doubt creeps in, because I think that's really like a very normal feeling when it's suddenly like reality is hit. You're on the hot rock, you're on Malta, you're at the starting point, and it's like, ooh. And you said you started to sort of, gather yourself. And I know you've got lots of like practical tips and advice, but what did you need to do to mentally, I suppose, get in the zone, like be ready to start and start confident? Did you start confident?
Yeah, I think I remember filming myself, and I had my cap, my new cap, and my what's it called, Category 4 sunglasses, and I put my factor 50 on, and I had my hydration pack full of 2 liters of water. I was in really light clothing. My pack wasn't too heavy. I had comfortable shoes on to walk. And I think I was like, I just need to go. I just need to start walking and see what happens. And in my mind, I had a plan. I guess I had two plans really. I had I had the plan that I'd applied for the grant for. So the grant was I'm going to hike across Malta. But in my mind, I'd really wanted to hike across Malta, Gozo, and Camino. So I had the mileage kind of mapped out in my head already. So I started in a town called Scala on the east coast of the island. And I wanted that day on the Monday, I wanted to finish in Mosta in the center of the island, because then it meant that on Tuesday I could finish-ish at a town called Chikewa at the end of the island on the west coast, jump on a ferry to Camino and walk that, sleep on Gozo on Tuesday night to walk across Gozo on Wednesday, and then come back to the mainland and catch my plane on the Thursday. So I guess I had my plan A and my plan B. And as soon as I started walking from Scala in this heat and this humidity, I was like, man, this is insane. This is such crazy weather. And I think I remember texting Amy and saying how hot it was. And the energy just sapped out of me. And I hadn't slept very well the night before either. So in my camper van, in this little campsite, it was raining, which normally isn't a problem. But I'd parked under a tree. So there was these massive dumps of rain all night. And I was worrying about being able to get up in time and catch a taxi to the airport. And sleep was, I don't know how much I slept, but it wasn't very much. I think fatigue, coupled with the fact that I was walking in these extreme temperatures and I hadn't mentally prepared for that. And then added to that thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to get to Mosta today. Yeah, I think within the first half hour, or maybe three quarters of an hour, I'd resigned myself already to think, you know what, I just need to be really sensible and just focus on getting to the end of the island in the next couple of days. So on day one, instead of walking 10 miles to Mosta, I walked 4.5 that afternoon. So between about 12-ish and I think 2, 2:30, something like that. My day ended in this air-conditioned cafe, downing a Powerade, with my face bright red and kind of my heart thumping because my body's working really hard to cool down. I'm like, right, I just need to end today now at like 2:30, find some accommodation, cool down, chill out, literally bring my body temperature down, and then start again the next day. So it was it was a bit disappointing, but I also felt like I was being really sensible. Maybe that's what comes with being 50. I don't know.
Heat is actually no joke.
Yeah.
Like if you're not heat adapted, it's I was going to say, coming from the UK and coming from Wales, you're probably not heat adapted. But it's like because I mean I remember when I was training for MDS, obviously like many years ago. But I was out in Australia for 3 months, and I go out running during the middle of the day. And I can't remember where I've read, but basically after about like 2 weeks, your body does adapt. But, your first day, the fact is your body's going to be working overtime. Your heart's going to be beating more, the red in the face, the electrolytes, the water you need to be consuming, the brain as well. There's nothing wrong with being sensible. It's it's like, that's the maturity, isn't it? That I suppose that comes with age, that actually, yeah, your health is the most important thing. And is there a track? Is there a set route? Is it similar to almost like walking a Camino? Is it like signposted in Malta? Like, is this like a traditional walk that that other people do, or is this
Yeah.
or is this a route that you have planned? And were you walking on like roads and pavement and concrete?
Yeah, this is just literally a route that I did on Google Maps. So I knew I wanted to start in Scala because it's one of the most easterly points of the island. So I set Google Maps from Scala to Chikewa via Mosta and did a walking route. So uh, just going back a step, we lived on the island, myself and Amy, for a couple of years. And obviously I'd been there as a kid and quite a lot during my earlier years in life. So I knew the island really well, but there isn't a track. There are traditionally not that many walking routes. If you use Komoot, I think there's a few people that have done different loops and routes around the island. And I think some people walked the circumference of the island, and there tend to be some walking tracks in the quieter parts of the island. But overall, it's quite built up in areas. So the majority of the whole route from east to west was on pavements and country roads, so roads without pavement on them. And that was challenging in some ways because, not that it took away from the excitement of the adventure, but it's definitely different to walking on any of the tracks or trails around here in Wales, where you're the only people around you, or not people, but the only things around you are the sheep and the cows and the grass. This was traffic, this was pavements, but there was a familiarity to that because I was walking places that, I'd worked nearby, and we'd gone out to different places and we'd spent time in these towns, or, we'd got our Chinese from this little town in Attard and we walked through there. So that, although it wasn't ideal in terms of, it wasn't a walk to get away from it all, it was actually quite a nice way to reminisce as well as doing it that way.
Having this time by yourself, sort of solo out in Malta, celebrating, or I say commemorating,
Commiserating.
commiserating. But it can also be a time, I suppose, for reflection and taking that time to look back and reflect on life, but also to look forward. And I suppose, what were some of the main sort of thoughts or the main sort of takeaways that you got from that solo experience? Having that time to yourself to really just think about life.
Yeah, I think I found myself thinking a lot about the future, but also reflecting on the past in and around Malta as well. So thinking about family members, people that we'd lost, places that we used to go, people that we used to see, but then looking forward to the future in terms of thinking, not being melancholy, but thinking, wow, I'm 50 now. I really want to make the most of the years that remain, which sounds a bit negative, but it was actually a positive thought process, thinking, and especially linking it in with Ollie and Amy in terms of what we could do as a family, and factoring in, the kind of logistics of having a child now, and therefore having to plan a bit more rigorously about, right, when are we going to go away as a family in the holidays. And it's very much thinking about, like, there's still so much I want to do as an individual, but also with my family as well. And thinking about how we're going to plan that, how we're going to afford that, and how we're going to make time for that in the future. So it was a positive process. It was a really interesting experience in that I realized at the end that the whole journey, and it was probably about 24 miles in distance in total. So 4.5 that really, really hot first day, 13.5 the next day where I really smashed it out and got up early to avoid the heat, and then about 6 miles to finish. I didn't listen. I didn't put my headphones in once. And I think before I'd left, I thought, right, I need to download all these podcasts. I need to have my Spotify music downloads because I'm going to be kind of almost needing this distraction and this music to get me along. But I actually didn't have anything in my ears. I was just listening, to the sights and sounds, and I guess looking up and being more present probably than I ever have been, which I don't know why it was different that time. Maybe because it was a walking adventure and I'd previously done, I'd been on my bike probably more so than anything else. So I found that really interesting when I finished.
But I'm really glad that you've had that, those 3 days, see you out there reflecting back. And something you just said before was around the balancing of sort of you as the individual, but also you with the family. And I think that's probably what a lot of women, I don't want to use the word struggle, but it's something that they're trying to figure out as well. And I don't think that there is one correct answer to figuring out that balance, that harmony. What's worked for you? What's worked for you and Amy? What's worked for you and your family?
I think we're still trying to find that balance. And I know for me as an individual, I do need that solo time, whether it's, sat on the exercise bike that's currently in the donkey shed with the weights bench that, it's only like 10 yards from the house, but it's still an almost mental break from the busyness of life. I know probably more so now than ever. I know that I need that in my life, whereas perhaps I had it before in my life, but I never realized the importance of having it, if that makes sense. Now, yeah, like you say, with work, with a child, with the farm, with the partner, with all the trappings of everyday life. I think it is really important for you as an individual. And I know everyone's different, but it's certainly important for me to just have that headspace. Whether it's the solo walk or whether it's, jump on an exercise bike or treadmill or go to the gym. I think I think sometimes I feel like I'm on that hamster wheel of life and you go and you go and you go. And I think that can be quite unhealthy. So yeah, definitely know more now that I need that personally, but then I also need to factor that in with what Amy needs, what Ollie needs. And, with this trip, although it's a short trip, I experienced the mum guilt. And I think other people have spoken about this before, finding that time to be able to go and do something that you want to do, but then the guilt of leaving your family and your partner to go and do that. It's like, and I know that Amy would never say, no, I don't need to go and do that. But I almost feel bad sometimes for wanting to go and do that. So I know that's in my own mind. And I think in some ways that does hold me back a little bit from doing more individual things. But again, it's about that balance, and it's about respecting each other in that way as well.
Oh, it's interesting, mum guilt, isn't it? Like, even though you're doing nothing wrong at all, but it's just, I suppose it's just there now, isn't it, for you? Like, you're a mum now. As you look sort of ahead, look towards the future, the next sort of decade, what are you hoping to achieve? Like, what's on the bucket list? What's on the dream list? What would you like to see happen?
You mean in terms of adventures or?
In terms of adventures, in terms of life, in terms of, just because I think sometimes they can almost be, especially with your, because you've got van life and you've got the farm, all of that to me, and actually even with your little one who when you're 60 will be a teenager. All of that is an adventure. So yeah, like, I suppose what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about, and I have thought about it a lot. I've probably thought about the next stage of my life more now than I ever have done in the rest of my life. And I think that is due to the transition in age and, a new decade, and it's an older decade, I can't get away from that. So I think a lot now about travel, and also how Ollie is going to experience travel and where we're going to go, some of the destinations that are on the list, and, van travel, taking the bikes with us. So, oh my goodness, there is so much I want us to do as a family. I don't know how we're going to pay for it all, but we need to find a way, because it's like things like, places that I've been when I traveled around the world. That's like, I really want to take him to the Grand Canyon. I wanted to see, some of these seven wonders of the world, and then places in Europe. I want him to go back to Chamonix when he's older, so he can see where he's taking his first steps. And all of this involves time and money, but I'm really determined to make it happen, because time is so short now. And if you're on the hamster wheel and you're just going along, and it's like, okay, we work, we have a break, we work again, and then before you know it, it's Christmas and another year has rolled around. I feel like more so now than ever, I need to really be making plans with the family so that we do get the most out of a summer or a half-term break. And then also, not just, where we'd like to take Ollie to experience things, not just abroad either. There are amazing places I want to take him. I want him to go and experience parts of Scotland and the Highlands, and, get him out of Wales and experience all these different places. Yeah, so there's also factoring in things that I'd like to do with Amy, me and her to go out and do a walk. So there's a walk locally called, I think it's the Penrith Pilgrimage Trail. And I didn't even realize there was a little pilgrimage trail a couple of miles from our house. So it starts in a place called Llandaff in Cardiff and goes up to a place called Penrith, which is about 5 or 6 miles away from here. It's a 20-mile route. So in my mind, I'm like, great, we just need 2 days. The logistics I've already got worked out in my mind. It's just trying to put that time aside to actually do it. They're the things that I really feel like I need to push on and do now. And whilst we do have a really busy life with the farm, etc., I do feel like it's really important that we do make this time, as a couple, to do these things together. But then also, exciting plans in the next decade for the glamping business to come on board. So we've just got planning permission to put 2 glamping pods here at the farm to diversify a little bit. So I know that's going to take up a lot of time, and it's already taken up a lot of time and effort and money to get to the stage we're at now. It's exciting, it's also daunting, but with that comes a new chapter in terms of, the farm and our lives here and how that's going to change. And hopefully within the next decade, we can both take a step back from our day jobs and then focus on the farm being more of our lifestyle now. But then bearing that in mind, we still need to put that time aside, to get away from that life and travel and adventure, etc. So it feels a bit like a really weird game of Tetris at the moment.
Now, you did start a podcast as well called Living Life Differently. They're a podcast for women by women back in the sort of the COVID pandemic sort of era. What's going on with the podcast? I love the podcast. You've had some amazing guests because I've been on it, but like the stories are wonderful, speaking to different women about who do live alternative lifestyles. And one of the things that I really loved about it was just actually, to be honest, like talking about the logistic, the money, like literally like how it happened. But yeah, what's going on with the podcast Living Life Differently?
Yeah, I absolutely have every intention of starting the Living Life Differently podcast up again. And it is literally a case of putting the time aside to do it. And now I've got into a bit of a routine since January. So Ollie started school officially in January, even though he's not official school age, he's got a full-time school place down the road from us. So fortunately, I have a Monday, about 6 hours to myself on a Monday and a couple of hours on a Tuesday when I'm not working. So literally I'm glad you've mentioned this because I feel motivated now to do it, to put the time aside to start recording again, because I had an absolute blast recording those episodes, obviously with people like yourselves, with Helen Dainty, who's currently 20 years into cycling around the world, Siobhan Daniels, who lives in a motorhome full time, absolutely incredible people. And I'd love to share more stories of women who it's not so much about adventure, it's more about women who have just said, you know what, I'm not going to do the traditional 9 to 5, buy a house, have a massive mortgage, work until I die to pay it all off. It's about women who've made some big leaps in their life. I guess a bit like this podcast where you can relate to the struggles and challenges and then get confidence from hearing those stories to go and do something yourself. So yeah, I totally want to bring that back. Please nudge me on it because I want to get it going.
I will nudge you. I think it's brilliant, like especially like more women's voices out there, more women sharing their story. I know, you had your sister on there sharing more about like her, moving to Portugal. You had me, episode 4, like Zola Gotham, like living on a canal boat. There was just so many great women. And sometimes, like, I always feel bad, especially when I'm only releasing like one episode a week. And I just think there's just so many women I want to speak to. There's so many stories that get out there. But I also love it when, like women like you who start a podcast, because also, I also think then you can really like relate to me more because you also, how difficult it is to do to actually like to do the interviews, to create the, to create the show notes, to produce the artwork, to share it and get it out there. Like there is a whole process. It's not as easy as just like having a really good conversation with somebody. So it actually makes me really happy because I'm like, yay, now you'll really understand. But there is like, I think you've got like 17, 18 episodes available, and it is on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher. Your podcast is the same as mine in terms of the content is evergreen. So you can go back and listen to the episodes, and actually it's all still really relevant. It's like the same with your episode, the first episode that we recorded back in 2017, like you cycling to Chamonix is still like everything that you shared on that episode is still really, really valid and will add like a lot of value for other people listening. So we talked about your podcast, living life differently, and that is what you have been doing. And, reflecting back to the Malta challenge, which you did to celebrate your 50th birthday. And I suppose just coming to the end of that challenge, like, did you compare that challenge to other challenges that you have done? And how did you celebrate? Like, how did you celebrate, and how did it compare to other challenges that you've done?
So it's an interesting one because when I set myself a challenge to do this, it was probably the least challenging thing I'd ever done in terms of distance or kind of physical challenge. And I think part of me was thinking, well, it kind of, is it good enough? Is it challenging enough to do it? And then I almost had to talk myself into it, say, yeah, it is, because obviously I'm not a super hiker, I don't go out, walking 10 miles a day or anything like that. I might jump on an exercise bike and crack out some miles, but I'm not traditionally a hiker. I don't really do routes or anything like that. So when I got to the end of it, oh my goodness, not even the end, partway through, my God, what a challenge. The heat was a challenge, the miles were a challenge, the walking on pavements was a challenge. Finding my way at times, even though the island was familiar, it was a challenge. So by the end, I really felt like, all right, this might only be, I don't know, 24 or 26 miles of walking, which doesn't sound like a lot because some people like yourself might walk that in a day, and I've spread it over 3 days. But it, it felt really meaningful to me. It was nowhere near the distance of some of the things I've done before, but the fact that it was across an island where my grandmother was born, where all these family members still live, and friends we've got from when we used to live there, it just felt really poignant, and I was really pleased with the fact that I had chosen to do that. And it was weird at the end because I finished in this place called Chickerell where the ferry goes over to Gozo, and there was these scuba divers there all getting ready to jump in the water. And I was looking for a nice place for a photo. And this guy was like, "Oh, hi, can I help you?" I'm like, "Oh, I wanted to get up that tower to take a photo. I've just finished walking across the island." And he said, "Oh, that tower's shut. You can't go up there. It's too dangerous." And then went on his way. So there wasn't even a recognition of what I'd said. Not that I wanted his congratulations or anything. I was like, oh my God, he hasn't registered that I've just done something personally quite epic. It took a little bit of the wind out my sails, but then I took some nice photos, sent my sister a video of me dancing on the rocks because that's what she wanted. And then I jumped on the bus back to some accommodation. So yeah, on reflection, I'm really pleased that I did it. And I think, saying to anybody else, I'd be like, don't think that you've got to do something a massive distance or some incredible epic achievement. As long as it's meaningful to you, it's still going to be a really good thing.
And this is really interesting. It's the no comparison. That's the rule. It's just like, don't compare yourselves. Don't compare your challenge to anyone else. Like you said, is it meaningful to you? Yes. Is it important to you? Yes. Is it personally an epic challenge? Yes. Is it taking you outside of your comfort zone? Yes. Is it challenging you? Yes, yes, yes. Like, honestly, like, it just doesn't matter what other people are doing. Like, it's just just immaterial if somebody walks, 10 miles a day, 15, 20, 25, there are women who run like 200 miles, 100 miles in a day. It's like insane. I think this is what's important is there'll be so many women who actually, they stop themselves because they'll think, well, it's not epic enough, or it's not, what are people going to think of me? Like, how are people going to judge me? And it's like, no, no, no. Hey, no. Like, we don't care about all those other people. You don't want to look back when you're 60, and you don't want to be looking back and thinking, why didn't I walk across Malta when I was 50? Like, why didn't I take on that, on that challenge? And I think it's really important to say that because, if it's challenging to you, if it excites you, if it's epic for you, do it, do it, do it, do it. Ali, where are you most active on social media? How can people find out more about your adventures, the podcast, find out more about you and Amy? Where should they go?
So we've got social media. We're active on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and you can find us at the Mahojos, which is our surname stuck together. So that's and then Mahojos, the Mahojos. So yeah, pop along. We do videos on YouTube quite regularly about our farm life and van life. We especially do videos when things go wrong. And my Malta video is on there for anyone that wants to have a look at how I got on.
Fantastic. But I would love for you to have the final words of advice, final words of wisdom for other women out there who do want to take on, their own personal challenge. They want to step outside of their comfort zone, whether it's for a 50th or for they just want it for their own pure enjoyment, for the challenge, for the sake of getting out there and doing something. Apart from just do it, what advice and tips would you like to share?
Oh, I love this part of your podcast because your guests in the past have just said some such meaningful things, and I've listened to these bits actively. And I think, oh my God, this is so powerful what people share. And I think for me, and especially linked into this challenge and challenges I've done before, it's always been about belief. So if I've wanted to go and do something new before, booking the flights or taking the bike to a place where I'm going to start riding it from, I've always had the belief that I could do it. But that has come from knowing that I've probably got the ability to do it. So kind of linking belief and ability together to have that confidence. For example, if you can do a 5 mile walk, you can probably push yourself to believe that you can do 10. So especially with, maybe smaller challenges or shorter challenges for someone who's just starting out, like build that belief around, going out and doing the few extra miles or, gaining confidence from watching people on social media or listening to podcasts like this. Because I think if you unlock the power of belief, you'd be really, really surprised at what you're capable of, no matter what age you are or whether you're starting out or trying to do something new for the first time.
Absolutely. Build that belief. Ali, it's been so amazing to catch up with you. Thank you so much for sharing more about what you've been up to over the past sort of 10 years and your Malta challenge and expedition, and just best of luck with the glamping and having a teenager, but that's like 10 years away. But yeah, just best of luck with all the future adventures and challenges, and it'll be amazing to follow along.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's always a pleasure to chat to you.
Hey, tribe. How you're doing? I hope you're all keeping well. Sarah here, just catching you up with what's been going on. So massive shout out to Ali for coming back on the Tough Girl podcast extra to share more about what she's been up to. So we first spoke with Ali back in 2017, so January 3rd, 2017. And that episode, we learned more about Ali working as a sports psychologist coach, and she shared more about riding her bike 767 miles from South Wales to Chamonix. I love the fact that we've got this episode that we can go back and listen to, and then listen to this current episode just to see the differences and how life has changed along the way. So going back to that first episode, so Ali went along to the Women's Adventure Expo in October 2015, where she picked up a leaflet about the Tough Girl podcast. And by May 2016, she was pedaling her old Alpine Stars mountain bike on a 767-mile, 13-day adventure from South Wales to Chamonix. At the age of 41, she had found something exciting to give her a new focus after forcibly retiring from sport due to old knee injuries. The ride to Chamonix took Ali to mental and physical places that she had never been before, and she climbed almost the height of Everest on her way. This journey was significantly longer than her first bikepacking adventure, which took her on the Whitehaven to Sunderland coast-to-coast route back in 1995 on the same bike. Ali's a sports psychologist coach and works with individuals and groups to teach them how to implement sports psychology strategies into their training, event and competition program. Since her bike ride to Chamonix, she has itchy feet and is making plans for a new bike packing adventure. So Ali's also interviewed me after I did the marathon at Des Sables, which is quite fun. So you can also listen to that episode if you want to learn more about sort of psychology and the different sort of mental training, mental resilience tips and tricks that I use when I ran 6 marathons in 6 days across the Sahara Desert, carrying everything I need on my back. Now, with regards to, so obviously during this episode, we learned more about Ali. She is now a new mum with a baby in tow, and how she's embracing the changes of motherhood. Just want to share a little bit more about our next episode, which is where we're going to be speaking to Dr. Carrie Andrews, who is the author of Pathfinding, which is exploring walking, motherhood and freedom. So I'm just going to read a little bit more about it. So Dr. Carrie Andrews is a writer, academic and passionate walker whose work explores the deep connection between women, walking and storytelling. She is the author of Wanderers, A History of Women Walking, and editor of Waymakers, an anthology of women's writing about walking. Her latest book, Pathfinding, on walking, motherhood and freedom, is a deeply personal and thought-provoking exploration of how motherhood reshapes a woman's identity, freedom and relationship with the outdoors. Having developed a love for walking in the Yorkshire Dales and the Lake District, Carrie has since climbed over 100 Munros in Scotland, though she has yet to convince her 2 young children to join her. In the episode of the Tough Girl podcast, Carrie shares her journey through postnatal depression, the challenges of early motherhood, and how walking became a vital tool for self-discovery, healing, and empowerment. She also sheds light on the often overlooked stories of historical women walkers, offering a fresh perspective on the intersection of movement, motherhood, and independence. So that episode is coming out on the 11th of March. There's going to be 6 episodes throughout March, pretty much every Tuesday, with a couple of bonus episodes thrown in on a Thursday. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, then please do, so you don't miss out on any of the episodes. But if you'd also like to support the work that I'm doing, help to increase the amount of female role models in the media, then you can support that work on Patreon. If you visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast, you can subscribe as a monthly member or as an annual member as well. It really does make a difference, allow me to fund the running costs of the podcast, the website, hosting all of the podcast episodes. And we are aiming to get 800 episodes out by the 4th of August, which will be the 10th year anniversary of the Tough Girl podcast. Thank you again for all your incredible support. It means the world to me. If you could tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast, I would be highly appreciative. It really does make a massive difference in encouraging more women to listen to the episode. And I'd love, if it's been a while since you visited the Tough Girl Challenges website, please do go and give it have a little scroll through. There's a resources section, there is a blog section. In the resources section, you can see all of our most popular episodes from every single year. Ali Mahoney's first episode is actually one of the most popular episodes of all time. So please do go give it a listen. But if you're interested in a specific area, so ultra running, through hiking, swimming, ultra endurance challenge, being a triathlete, cyclist, fighter, scientists, researchers, explorers, and expedition leaders, etc., there's a dedicated resources page based on the interviews that I've done, which would fit into that category. So please do go and give it a listen. And if you wanted to learn more about the episode where I'm interviewed by Ali as well, that episode came out on October 6, 2016. Sarah Williams. I'm being interviewed by Ali Mahoney Johnson from ithinksport.com. And during the episode, we discussed some of the big challenges I faced in my life, from deciding to leave my job, coping with the summit night on Mount Kilimanjaro, to training for and running the Marathon des Sables in April. And Ali also wrote a blog post about that as well. And oh my gosh, we were helping to raise awareness for Women's Sports Week, which was organised by Women in Sport in 2016. Oh my gosh, it feels so long ago now. Well, it was so long ago. I need to if I say I need to run for another marathon, no, I don't. I'm good at the moment. I'm training for the GR10. I'm doing lots of strength training, but I am trying to get back out and do some walking and a little bit of running as well. But if you'd like to be kept up to date of what I'm up to in between episodes, then please do come and give me a follow on Instagram at Tough Girl Challenges. That's where I'm most active. But you know what? I always really love to hear from you. It's really amazing to get little emails or DMs from people just letting me know what you're up to, or if you're enjoying a particular episode, or if there's a particular woman that you'd like me to interview, or if you feel there's an area that I'm not focusing in on, then please do let me know. Or if you think there's an area that I can improve on, especially with regards to my questioning and what I'm focusing in on, please do let me have that feedback, because that's how I can improve. That's how I can make sure that I'm adding value to you, the listener. It's so important to me that I do that. So send me an email, sarah@toughgirlchallenges.com. I would love to hear from you. Bite the bullet. Send me an email. Reach out. Let me know what you're up to. I always really appreciate just hearing from you, especially sometimes when I'm back at home and it's sort of my life revolves from my bed, where I do a lot of rotting or a lot of editing, the gym, and working. So literally it's on like permanent rotation, with a lot of eating in between as well. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.